Have you ever wondered if the legendary city of King David, the heart of ancient Jerusalem described in the Bible, was real? Does tangible evidence lie buried beneath the bustling streets of modern Jerusalem, waiting to tell its story? What if I told you that archaeologists are uncovering secrets right now that could reshape our understanding of this foundational period in biblical history? Stay with us as we embark on an incredible journey deep into the earth and back through millennia. Welcome to Biblical Curiosities. Today, we are venturing into the very core of ancient Israel, exploring the archaeological discoveries within the city of David, the original site of Jerusalem. This isn't just about stones and pottery. It's about uncovering the physical traces of the world inhabited by figures like David, Solomon, and the prophets, seeking to bridge the gap between the sacred texts and the tangible past. We'll sift through layers of history, examine monumental structures, decipher ancient inscriptions, and confront the controversies and debates that inevitably arise when archaeology intersects with faith and deeply held narratives. Prepare to have your perceptions challenged and your understanding enriched as we delve into the compelling and sometimes contested evidence emerging from the ground where biblical history unfolded. We'll look at the strategic importance of the location, the vital role of its water source, the monumental architecture that speaks of power and administration, and the small personal items that connect us directly to the people who lived there thousands of years ago. This exploration touches upon questions of identity, history, and the very roots of Western civilization, making the city of David one of the most significant archaeological sites on the planet. Join us as we meticulously unpack the findings, weigh the interpretations, and attempt to reconstruct a picture of Jerusalem during the time of the Israelite monarchy, specifically focusing on the era attributed to King David himself, a period shrouded in both legend and, increasingly, archaeological reality. We aim to present the information objectively, acknowledging where the evidence is strong, where it is suggestive, and where questions still remain, allowing you to form your own informed perspective on this fascinating subject that continues to captivate scholars, believers, and history enthusiasts alike across the globe, making it a truly universal quest for understanding our shared heritage. The story is complex, layered like the very soil archaeologists excavate, and it demands careful consideration of every artifact, every structure, every inscription, within its precise historical and geographical context, a task we undertake with enthusiasm and respect for the profound implications involved. Before we dig deeper, let's establish exactly what we mean by the City of David. It's crucial to understand that this is not the entirety of the walled old city of Jerusalem that tourists visit today. The City of David is actually a relatively small, narrow ridge located just south of the Temple Mount, sloping down towards the Kidron Valley on the east and the Tyropoion Valley on the west. This specific geographical location is key. Why here? The primary reason, undoubtedly, was the presence of the Gihon Spring, the only reliable natural source of fresh water in the immediate vicinity. In the arid landscape of the Judean hills, control over water meant survival and the ability to sustain a population, making this site strategically invaluable long before David's time. The Bible itself, in the second book of Samuel, chapter 5, recounts David conquering the stronghold, Zion, then known as Jebus, from the Jebusites and establishing it as his capital, renaming it the City of David. This act transformed a relatively modest hilltop fortress into the political and religious center of the nascent Israelite kingdom. For centuries, scholars and explorers debated the exact location of this original city. While tradition pointed towards the western hill, Mount Zion today, pioneering archaeological work, particularly from the 19th century onwards, began to focus attention on this eastern ridge, closer to the vital Gihon Spring. Figures like Charles Warren, Kathleen Kenyon, Yigal Shiloh, and more recently Eilat Mazar, Ronnie Reich, and Eli Shukran have led excavations that have gradually peeled back the layers of accumulated debris, revealing occupation levels spanning millennia, from the Chalcolithic period right through to the Ottoman era. Understanding this specific geography and the history of its identification is fundamental to appreciating the significance of the discoveries we will be discussing. It's within this tightly defined, historically charged area that the search for David's Jerusalem continues, yielding findings that are constantly reshaping our understanding of the city's origins and its development during the crucial Iron Age period, the very time the Bible places King David on the throne, forging a unified kingdom from this very spot. The challenge lies in meticulously separating the layers, dating the structures and artifacts accurately, and interpreting them within the context of both the archaeological record and the biblical narrative, a process fraught with complexity, but rich with potential insights into this pivotal moment in history. The very soil here is thick with stories, demanding careful scientific investigation to unlock its secrets. The biblical narrative provides a powerful framework for understanding the significance of this location. According to the second book of Samuel, chapter 5, verses 6 through 10, David led his men against the Jebusites who controlled the stronghold. The text famously mentions the Jebusites taunting David, saying even the blind and the lame could defend the fortress, possibly referring to its natural defenses or a perceived weakness in David's forces. The passage then cryptically states that David captured the stronghold of Zion, which is the city of David, and mentions Joab possibly gaining access through the tzinor, a Hebrew word often translated as water shaft or gutter, leading to much speculation about how the city was actually taken, perhaps by utilizing the existing water system connected to the Gihon spring. Following the conquest, the text emphasizes David's establishment of the city as his capital. And David lived in the stronghold and called it the city of David. And David built the city all around from the Millo inward. This passage highlights several key elements: the conquest, the renaming, David residing there, and significant building activity, including a mysterious structure called the Millo. Furthermore, the narrative continues by describing David bringing the Ark of the Covenant to Jerusalem, 2 Samuel chapter 6, establishing the city not just as a political capital, but as the central religious site for the Israelites, a status further solidified by his son Solomon's construction of the first temple on the adjacent Mount Moriah, the Temple Mount. This biblical account sets high expectations for the archaeological record. If David established a powerful kingdom with Jerusalem as its capital, shouldn't we find evidence of significant construction, administration, and a burgeoning urban center dating to his time, traditionally placed around the 10th century BCE? This question drives much of the archaeological investigation in the city of David. Researchers are looking for monumental architecture befitting a royal capital, evidence of fortifications, administrative buildings, and artifacts that can be securely dated to the Iron Age Toye period, the archaeological designation often associated with the time of David and Solomon. The Bible paints a picture of a dramatic transformation from a Jebusite town to the glorious capital of a united monarchy, and it is this transformation that archaeologists seek to trace in the stones and soil of the city of David, searching for correlations that might support or challenge the historical accuracy of these foundational texts. Understanding that the relationship between text and artifact is often complex and requires nuanced interpretation. The weight of tradition and scripture makes this search particularly charged, as findings can have profound implications for religious and historical understanding. The search for David's city hasn't been easy. Archaeological work in Jerusalem, particularly in the City of David area, faces immense challenges. Firstly, the area has been continuously inhabited, destroyed, and rebuilt for millennia. This means that layers of history are stacked one upon another, often meters deep, reaching the levels corresponding to the 10th century BCE, the time of David, requires carefully excavating through Hellenistic, Roman, Byzantine, Islamic, Crusader, and Ottoman periods, each leaving its own mark and often disturbing or reusing materials from earlier periods. Imagine trying to find the foundations of a specific 3,000-year-old building buried under layers representing dozens of subsequent generations of construction, destruction, and rebuilding. It's an incredibly complex stratigraphic puzzle. Secondly, the city of David Ridge is today a densely populated residential neighborhood, Silwan, interspersed with archaeological parks. Excavating often requires navigating complex land ownership issues, working within limited spaces, and dealing with the logistical difficulties of removing vast amounts of earth and debris from a confined, urban environment. Political sensitivities surrounding excavations in East Jerusalem add another layer of complexity, making large-scale, unobstructed investigation difficult. Early explorers like Captain Charles Warren in the 1860s faced perilous conditions, tunneling deep underground, often relying on rudimentary techniques. Kathleen Kenyon's work in the 1960s employed more systematic stratigraphic methods, but still only uncovered relatively small areas. Yigal Shiloh's extensive excavations from 1978 to 1985 significantly advanced understanding, but also highlighted the sheer scale of the task and the fragmentary nature of the evidence for the earliest periods of the Israelite city. These challenges mean that our picture of 10th century BCE Jerusalem is still incomplete, pieced together from various excavation areas rather than a single comprehensive exposure. It's crucial to keep these limitations in mind when evaluating the archaeological claims. Finding definitive, unambiguous proof of specific biblical events or figures like David is exceedingly rare in archaeology anywhere, let alone in a site as complex and continuously occupied as Jerusalem. Instead, archaeologists look for patterns, convergences, and material culture that align with, or perhaps contradict, the historical periods described in the texts, always aware that absence of evidence is not necessarily evidence of absence, especially given the disturbed nature of the site and the limited areas excavated down to the relevant strata. The very act of digging here is fraught with difficulty, requiring patience, precision, and a deep understanding of the site's long and turbulent history. Perhaps one of the most electrifying and debated discoveries in the city of David, relating to the period of King David, is the large stone structure. Excavated primarily by the late Dr. Eilat Mazar, starting in 2005, this monumental building complex is located at the northern crest of the city of David, near the summit, a commanding position overlooking the area. Mazar herself proposed that this structure could be the remains of King David's palace, described in the second book of Samuel, chapter 5, verse 11, which mentions King Hiram of Tyre sending cedar wood, carpenters and masons to build David a house, a bayit in Hebrew, which can mean palace or temple. The structure itself is impressive, featuring massive walls, some up to several meters thick, constructed with large, partially dressed boulders. Its strategic location, seemingly sophisticated construction for its time, and pottery found within. The fill layers that Mazar dated primarily to the Iron Age, Iron Age 2IA transition, around the 11th to 10th centuries BCE, formed the basis of her identification. She pointed to the discovery of a specific type of fine pottery, known as Bichrome ware, often associated with Phoenician connections, like Hiram of Tyre, and argued that the scale and location fit the description of a royal edifice from David's era. Furthermore, she linked it stratigraphically to the nearby stepped stone structure, which we'll discuss later, suggesting they formed part of a single, massive royal complex dominating the early city. However, this interpretation is not universally accepted within the archaeological community. Critics raise questions about the dating, suggesting some pottery could be later, possibly 9th century BCE, placing it potentially in the time of the Omride dynasty, or later Judean kings rather than David or Solomon. Others question whether the structure is indeed a palace, suggesting alternative functions, perhaps as a fortress or an administrative center, possibly even originating in the pre-Davidic Jebusite period and later incorporated or rebuilt by the Israelites. The debate hinges on precise pottery chronology, which is notoriously complex for this transitional period, the interpretation of architectural styles, and the correlation with the biblical text, which itself is subject to interpretation. Despite The ongoing debate, the large stone structure remains a significant discovery. It undeniably points to major construction activity and centralized organization on the summit of the city of David during the early Iron Age too. Whether it is David's palace or not, its existence challenges earlier views that 10th century Jerusalem was merely a small, insignificant village, suggesting a more substantial urban presence during the period traditionally associated with the United Monarchy. The sheer scale of the foundation work involved speaks volumes about the ambition and resources available to whoever commissioned it, marking a significant moment in the city's development. Central to the existence and strategic importance of the city of David, both before and after David's conquest, was its water source, the Gihon Spring. Located in the Kidron Valley, just outside the presumed eastern wall of the ancient city, this spring provided the lifeblood for Jerusalem's inhabitants. However, having the main water source outside the city walls presented a significant vulnerability, especially during times of siege. Ingenious engineering solutions were developed over centuries to access the spring's water safely from within the city and to channel it for use. One of the earliest and most debated components of this system is Warren's Shaft, discovered by Charles Warren in 1867. This complex system consists of a stepped tunnel leading down from within the city, a horizontal tunnel, and a deep vertical shaft, about 14 meters high, that descends towards the level of the Gihon Spring. For many years, it was popularly theorized that this shaft was the Tzinner mentioned in the Bible, through which Joab supposedly climbed to capture Jebus for David. The idea was that inhabitants could lower buckets down the shaft to draw water, flowing through a lower channel connected to the spring. However, more recent archaeological investigations, particularly by Ronnie Reich and Eli Shukron, have challenged this interpretation. They argue that the vertical shaft is a natural karstic fissure, enlarged by human hands, but likely not used for drawing water with buckets due to its configuration and the discovery of another, more sophisticated system nearby. They propose that Warren's shaft system was primarily designed to allow people to descend close to the water source, perhaps to fill vessels directly from a pool or channel fed by the spring, especially during peacetime or before later more secure systems were built. These later systems include the Siloam Channel, an earlier, partly surface-level channel directing water southwards, and the famous Hezekiah's Tunnel. Understanding the evolution of the Gihon waterworks is crucial. It reveals the immense effort invested by the city's inhabitants over generations to secure their water supply. The complexity of these tunnels, carved through solid bedrock using relatively primitive tools, speaks volumes about the engineering skills and organizational capacity present in ancient Jerusalem. Regardless of whether Warren's shaft was the exact route used by Joab, the existence of such elaborate water systems dating back to the Canaanite, Middle Bronze Age, and Israelite, Iron Age periods underscores the paramount importance of the Gihon Spring and the continuous efforts to protect and exploit it, forming an essential part of the city's infrastructure long before and during David's reign, laying the groundwork for the capital he would establish. The water system is, in many ways, the silent heart of the city of David's story. While Warren's Shaft represents an early phase of water management, perhaps the most famous and archaeologically significant part of the Gihon water system is Hezekiah's Tunnel. This remarkable engineering feat is explicitly mentioned in the Bible. The second book of Kings, chapter 20, verse 20 states, "As for the other events of Hezekiah's reign, all his achievements and how he made the pool and the tunnel by which he brought water into the city, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the Kings of Judah?" 2 Chronicles chapter 32, verses 2 through 4 and verse 30, provides even more detail, describing how King Hezekiah, anticipating a siege by the Assyrian king Sennacherib, which occurred around 701 BCE, stopped the springs outside the city and blocked the upper outlet of the Gihon Spring and channeled the water down to the west side of the city of David. Archaeology has stunningly confirmed this biblical account. Hezekiah's Tunnel, also known as the Siloam Tunnel, is a subterranean aqueduct approximately 533 meters, 1,750 feet long, carved through solid bedrock. It snakes its way from the Gihon spring source, safely within a protected system, to the Pool of Siloam, located within the city walls at the southern end of the city of David Ridge. This ensured a secure water supply for Jerusalem's inhabitants, even under prolonged siege. The engineering itself is astounding. 2 teams of tunnelers, presumably starting from opposite ends, carved through the rock using picks and hammers, guided only by rudimentary surveying techniques, likely following natural fissures in the rock where possible. They remarkably managed to meet in the middle, albeit with a few twists and turns, reflecting the difficulty of maintaining direction underground. The gradient is gentle, allowing water to flow slowly from the spring to the pool. The discovery that truly cemented the connection between this tunnel and the biblical King Hezekiah was the Siloam inscription, found accidentally by a boy playing near the southern end of the tunnel in 1880. This Hebrew inscription, carved into the tunnel wall, commemorates the moment the 2 teams of excavators met. Written in classical Hebrew script characteristic of the late 8th century BCE, it vividly describes the final breakthrough. While the tunnelers were still wielding the axe, each man toward his fellow, and while there were still 3 cubits to be cut through, there was heard the voice of a man calling to his fellow, for there was an overlap in the rock on the right and on the left. And when the tunnel was driven through, the tunnelers struck axe against axe, one against the other, and the water flowed from the source to the pool for 1,200 cubits, and the height of the rock above the heads of the tunnelers was 100 cubits. This inscription provides powerful, extra-biblical corroboration for the biblical accounts of Hezekiah's preparations against the Assyrian threat, dating the tunnel firmly to his reign and offering a tangible link between the archaeological remains and the historical narrative. It stands as one of the most important Iron Age inscriptions ever found in Israel, bringing the biblical text to life in stone and water. Beyond the monumental structures and impressive water systems, archaeology in the city of David has unearthed smaller artifacts that provide intimate glimpses into the administrative and personal lives of people during the First Temple period, roughly 10th to early 6th centuries BCE. Among the most significant of these finds are bulli, small lumps of clay used to seal documents. Papyrus scrolls, the common writing material of the time, would be rolled up, tied with a string, and a lump of wet clay would be pressed over the knot. Personal seal, often mounted on a ring or pendant and typically engraved with the owner's name, and sometimes their title or patronymic, father's name, would then be impressed into the clay. When the clay dried, it created a secure, personalized seal. If the document was open, the bulla would have to be broken. Fires, which often destroyed the papyrus documents themselves, like during the Babylonian destruction of Jerusalem in 586 BCE, could inadvertently bake the clay bullae, preserving them for archaeologists to find thousands of years later. Excavations in the city of David, particularly in areas identified as administrative buildings or archives near the large stone structure and on the eastern slope, have yielded hundreds of these bullae. What makes many of them incredibly exciting is that they bear names identical to figures mentioned in the Bible, particularly in the book of Jeremiah, who lived in the final decades of the kingdom of Judah, just before the Babylonian exile. For example, Eilat Mazar's excavations uncovered a bulla bearing the name Jehukal, son of Shelemiah, son of Shovi. This individual, Jehukal, or Jukal, is mentioned twice in the book of Jeremiah, chapter 37, verse 3, and chapter 38, verse 1, as one of the officials serving King Zedekiah who persecuted the prophet Jeremiah. Nearby, another bulla was found inscribed, Gedaliah, son of Pashur, another official mentioned in Jeremiah chapter 38, verse 1, alongside Jehukal, as seeking Jeremiah's death. Yet another significant find is the bulla of Gemariah, son of Shaphan, discovered during Yigal Shiloh's excavations. Gemariah, son of Shaphan, is described in Jeremiah chapter 36 as a scribe and official at the royal court, who was present when Baruch read Jeremiah's scroll, and who urged King Jehoiakim not to burn it. While the existence of a matching name doesn't automatically prove it's the same biblical individual, some names were common. The concentration of these specific names, including patronymics and titles matching those in the biblical text, found in strata dating to the correct period, late 7th, early 6th century BCE, within what appears to be an administrative context in Jerusalem, provides compelling circumstantial evidence. These tiny artifacts act as tangible links to the corridors of power described in the Bible, suggesting a literate administration and lending historical weight to the narratives involving these specific individuals. They bridge the gap between Scripture and the archaeological record in a very personal way. Complementing the large stone structure at the summit, another massive architectural feature dominates the eastern slope of the city of David, the stepped stone structure. This imposing structure, excavated initially by R.A.S. McAllister and J. Garrow Duncan in the 1920s and later more extensively by Kathleen Kenyon and Yigal Shiloh, is essentially a towering curved retaining wall built of numerous small fieldstones, creating a series of ascending terraces or steps. It reaches a height of over 20 meters, 65 feet, and is about 27 meters, 90 feet, wide at its broadest point, making it the largest Iron Age structure found in Israel to date. Its sheer scale and prominent location suggest it served a critical function, likely supporting a major building complex situated higher up on the ridge, possibly the large stone structure identified by Eilat Mazar as David's palace, or other significant fortifications or administrative buildings on the Acropolis. The dating of the stepped stone structure has been subject to debate, intertwined with the dating of the large stone structure it seems to support. Kathleen Kenyon initially dated its construction to the end of the Late Bronze Age, pre-Davidic. However, Yigal Shiloh's later excavations, which reached bedrock in some areas, suggested that while parts might incorporate earlier elements, the main structure belongs to the Iron Age, potentially starting in the 12th or 11th century BCE and reaching its final form in the 10th or 9th century BCE. Eilat Mazar argued strongly that the stepped stone structure and the large stone structure were integral parts of the same 10th century BCE building project initiated by David or Solomon, possibly representing the biblical Millo, a term whose meaning is uncertain, but often interpreted as a filling or terrace structure used to support fortifications or significant buildings on a slope. If this interpretation is correct, the stepped stone structure provides further monumental evidence for a powerful, centralized authority in Jerusalem during the very period the Bible assigns to the United Monarchy. It represents an enormous investment in labor and engineering, designed to overcome the steep topography of the eastern slope and create a stable platform for the city's most important buildings. Even if its precise dating or connection to the term Millo remains debated, the stepped stone structure undeniably testifies to significant urban development and sophisticated construction capabilities in the city of David during the Iron Age. Its imposing presence would have dominated the view from the Kidron Valley, projecting an image of strength and stability for the capital city, regardless of whether it precisely matches the biblical description or belongs wholly to David's reign. Certainly signifies a major phase of construction activity on the Eastern Hill during the formative period of the Israelite monarchy, adding another layer to the complex picture of early Jerusalem. So what does all this archaeological evidence, the large stone structure, the intricate water systems like Warren's Shaft and Hezekiah's Tunnel, with its corroborating inscription, the administrative bulle bearing biblical names, and the massive stepped stone structure, tell us about the city of David, the Jerusalem of the Bible? It paints a picture of a city that was undeniably significant during the Iron Age. The discoveries demonstrate sophisticated engineering, monumental construction, and organized administration, particularly from the 9th century BCE onwards, and increasingly, evidence points towards substantial activity already in the 10th century BCE, the traditional time of David and Solomon. While no inscription saying "Welcome to David's Palace" has been found, and likely never will be, the cumulative weight of the evidence provides compelling correlations with the biblical narrative. The location matches, the strategic importance, centered on the Gihon spring, is clear, and the types of structures and artifacts being unearthed align with what one might expect from a developing regional capital during that period. The large stone structure and stepped stone structure suggest major building projects consistent with the establishment of a royal center. The water systems reflect the city's long history and the ingenuity required to sustain it, with Hezekiah's tunnel offering a stunning convergence of text and archaeology. The bullae provide tangible links to specific individuals mentioned in the biblical accounts of the later Judean monarchy. However, it's crucial to maintain scholarly rigor and acknowledge the ongoing debates. The precise dating of key structures like the large stone structure and stepped stone structure remains contested, impacting whether they belong definitively to David's reign or slightly later. The interpretation of findings can be influenced by pre-existing beliefs, requiring careful separation of data from narrative. Archaeology rarely offers absolute proof in the way mathematics or physics does. Instead, it provides probabilities, patterns, and material context that can support, challenge, or refine historical accounts. The City of David excavations reveal a complex reality, perhaps not always matching the grandeur depicted in later biblical interpretations, but certainly indicating a place of growing importance in the 10th and subsequent centuries BCE. The search continues, with new discoveries potentially emerging with every excavation season, constantly adding pieces to this fascinating puzzle. What we can say with confidence is that the City of David is yielding remarkable evidence that brings the world of the Bible to life, grounding its narratives in a tangible, verifiable past, even as the precise details remain subjects of intense study and lively discussion among experts worldwide. The quest to uncover the City of David is more than just an archaeological dig. It's a journey into the heart of history, faith, and identity for millions around the world. The evidence emerging from beneath Jerusalem's ancient ridge offers tantalizing glimpses into the world of the Bible, sometimes confirming, sometimes challenging, but always deepening our understanding. While debates continue and mysteries remain, the stones, tunnels, and tiny clay seals are undeniably speaking. If this exploration of the City of David and its connection to biblical Jerusalem touched you in some way, if it sparked your curiosity or deepened your understanding, please don't keep it to yourself. Show your support by hitting the like button. Subscribe to Biblical Curiosities for more deep dives into history and scripture, and share this video with someone you think needs to hear this message today. Sometimes, a single video can illuminate a topic, change a perspective, or even inspire someone's day or perhaps even their life journey. Be part of spreading that knowledge and curiosity. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey.